Hello, my name is JT Benitiz, and I'm the Extension Educator for Agriculture and Natural Resources for The Ohio State University Extension in Butler County. And I'm here today to talk to you about growing onions and shallots in the home garden for the 2020 Virtual Farm Science Review. And I'm excited to talk to you about this today. And like I said, there's me. That was me last year at the Ohio Farm Science Review. Hopefully in 2021, we can return back to the Molly Cairn Center and have the Farm Science Review actually live there. And but this year, we're working with what we have to do, and we'll have a virtual series this year, and it's going to be great, great topics, along with many other things that are going on that you can see with the Farm Science Review virtual this year. I'm going to go ahead and close my screen out so you can see my presentation very well, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so onions. Onions are part of the Allium genus, and in the family ESC family called onions. They're a cool season crop, and they're moderately easy to grow. They have medium nutrient needs. They're a high water user, and their common propagation is either by transplants or sets. Onions and their relatives are an important part of many cuisines around the world. They have been consumed since prehistoric times. They are considered a staple in most kitchens. You can grow them and consume them as green onion, or you can consume their bulbs. All the plants are edible. All parts of the plants are edible. Onions are easy to grow, and there are many types and varieties to grow. The common onion is in the genus of plants called Allium onion, which is the onion family of plants, which includes garlic, scallions, shallots, leeks, and chives, which are in the Allium genus. The Allium genus, that's what they're actually in, and then cepa is the onion part of it. It is one of the most popular vegetables in Ohio's home gardens. Onions are known to be adaptable, which helps onions to be grown in various regions and zones. And onions prefer cool weather, but they can grow in all regions of the country. All onions prefer looser soils, full sun, and regular moisture. They will perform best in well-drained, slightly acidic, fertile soils and full sun. Onions may grow from seed sets and plants, and the planting method selected is based on cost, use, availability, and planting ease. Okay, so onion classification. Onions are classified by bulb shape, which can be flat, round, or globe. Onions have three distinct colors: yellow, white, and red. And onions are often grouped according to taste, which is their pungency rating, which range from sweet to pungent, strong onion type flavor. Obviously, onion strong flavor. The two main types of onions are strong flavored, which is the American, and the mild. Often, the strong flavor, I should say, are Americans, and then the mild flavored onions are actually European styles. In general, the American onion produces bulbs of smaller size, denser texture, stronger flavor, and better keeping quality than European types. Globe varieties tend to keep longer in storage. Of the three colors of onions, yellow ones store the best. And lastly, the bulb response to day length, which is based on long, intermediate, or short daylight sunlight availability, is what affects onion bulb development. So there's three types of daylights or day that onions, different varieties have either a long daylight they need to be able to develop their bulbs, intermediate daylight, which is not as long of day, or a short daylight, which those type of varieties don't need as much sunlight to develop their bulbs. As you can see here in the picture, you have the bulb shapes, which is number one is flattened globe. Number two is globe. Most one you're going to probably see the most often. A high globe, a spindle, Spanish. You'll see those pretty often as well. Flat. Number 7 is thick flat. Number 8 is granix. And number 9 is a top style shape of an onion. So site selection and soil preparation. Onions grow best in an area that has full sun, loose, well-drained, fertile, sandy loam to silt loam soils with plenty of organic matter. Onions are easily affected by high acidic soils and prefer soil pH between around 6 to 6.8, which is their best range. Avoid heavy clay soils as they retain water longer after rains and irrigation. Heavy clay soils should be modified with organic matter to improve the aeration, soil drainage, and nutrients. Work in compost to loosen the compaction in those heavy soils. Heavier soils do not allow onion bulbs to grow to their full potential. That tight soil that's compacted won't actually let the bulb expand and grow. Growing onions in poorly drained, highly compacted soils can lead to disease problems when soil is too wet for too long and bulb development problems when they're very dry. Irregular bulb development can also occur from those compacted soils, which I mentioned before. Other factors could also develop from inadequate soil that will have issues with your development of your bulbs. Improve your soil's organic matter content by adding well-rotted manure or compost in the spring or fall, and do not use fresh manure as it may contain harmful bacteria and may increase weed problems. You need enough time for that manure to decompose. Prior to planting, till your soils to provide a loose growing bed for the bulb growth. Organic matter added should meet most nutrient needs, but your soil test will let you know if you need any additional amending or fertilization. Soil tests should always be conducted before any soil amending. Soil testing will inform you of soil deficiencies, pH, and other important information. Soil tests will also give you recommendations how to properly amend your soil, and you should follow all those recommendations in the testing report. Onion varieties also have different requirements as to the number of hours of daylight required to make a bulb. We've talked about this. We'll talk a little bit now about those different daylights here. The amount of sun is very important for onion development. While longer day length promotes flowering in many plants, day length induces bulbing in onions. The amount of sunlight the bulb needs directly relates to the onion's group. Short day onions require 11 to 12 hours of sunlight. Intermediate onions require 13 to 14 hours of daylight or sunlight, and long day onions require 16 hours or more hours of daylight. Long day and intermediate day onions grow the best in our Ohio region. If the seed catalog lists the onion as a long day, it sets bulbs when it receives 15 to 16 hours of daylight and is used to produce onions in our northern summers. Short day varieties set bulbs with about 12 hours of daylight and are used in the deep south for winter production. So you need some starting materials. You need a location to plant. You've got raised beds, small garden area, a large garden, or even a field. You've got tillage tools such as a rototiller, your garden tools, or even a tractor. Look at my plow there. That's my tractor with the plow on the back there. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of area where I'm planting my garden stuff. And then purchase quality onion seeds, transplants, or sets to start your production. Okay, so planting. Onions can be planted in the spring for early onions and in the fall for perennial or multiplier types of onions when soil is workable depending on your planting type. Review your varieties purchased from your seed source on what works best for planting in your region. Not all varieties are the same. Green onion and transplants are typically for spring planting, and onion sets or bulbs are for fall planting, but can also be planted in the spring as well. Most onions are planted in early spring as soon as you can cultivate your garden, unless you're doing a fall planting, but a lot of them are planted early in the spring. A lot of them are. Regardless of how thickly they are sown or planted, onions should be thinned to a spacing of 2 inches apart in a row if intended to harvest for green onions, and 4 inches apart if you intend to harvest moderate-sized bulbs, and 8 inches apart for large bulbs. Rows are spaced 12 to 24 inches apart, and you can also plant onions in a block with each plant 4 to 8 inches apart. Onions can be grown from seed, sets, or transplants. So direct seed, if you're direct planting into the garden area, seed should be sowed a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep and cover lightly with fine soil. Seeds can also be directly sown in the ground once the soil is workable, approximately late to March into April. Keep the tops of your plant rows moist until you see plants emerge. Plant seeds thickly, then thin using thinnings, thin them out and use the thinnings as green onions. Seeds require the most work but are less expensive. Seeds planted to be used as transplants can be sowed indoors 4 to 8 weeks before planting outside. 1 week before planting the onions that you've grown indoors, gradually harden them off, those transplants, by placing them outdoors and getting used to the outdoor temperatures before you put them in the ground. Transplants can either be bought as bunches or start your own by sowing your seeds indoors that 4 to 8 weeks prior to planting. And when planting, bury the roots with 1 inch of the lower portion of the plant in the soil. Planting transplants allows for correct spacing as the plant is already growing, so you can get a good space already established. 2 to 3 inches apart from each other is best, or more depending on your preferred bulb size. So you may have a little bit different spacing depending how big you want to get your bulbs. You can probably still use these as green onions too if you want to plant them that close. Onion sets are planted in the spring for early onions and in the fall for perennial or multi-flyer types of onions when soil is workable. March or April or October time period would probably be the best around here this time of year if you want to do some fall planting. November is getting a little late. Generally, you want to plant your garlic around that time, so I would probably plant my onions as well. That's really right before the season ends. Sets are more easily grown for optimum yield. Sets are dormant bulbs that can be planted directly into the ground. Onion sets should be planted 1 to 2 inches deep and 2 to 3 inches apart. Then once the plants begin to grow, thin them to 3 to 4 inches apart or further depending on your bulb size preference. Plants thinned from a row to create room can also be, again, used for green onions. So there's no waste in these plants. Fertilization. Before planting begins, it's recommended to complete a soil test of the area you plan to plant, the area that you plan to plant your onions. The soil test will give you a full analysis of the soil from nutrient needs to your pH level. Follow the directions and recommendations from the soil test to improve the soil for your onions. It's recommended to test your soil every 3 years, unless you have a lot of modifications to your soil for which you want to test in that first year, and test after you've done your soil amending to see where it's at, just to see if you need to do any further. And then if you've got good soil, do it every 3 years. Some people have a different preference and may want to do it in a shorter amount of time than that. It's just up to you what you want to see. Your soil will, your crops will tell you a lot of times if things are missing, and then you'll have to do that modification. Onions require more nutrients than any other vegetable plants. A minimum of 2 fertilizer applications may be needed, and even up to 3. Fertilizer applications of a complete fertilizer is recommended throughout the growing season. An example of the first application could consist of 4 to 5 pounds of triple 10 at 100 square feet or equivalent before planting or after planting. The second application in the middle of the growing season during plant growth, and the last application applied 4 weeks before harvest during crucial bulb development time. With the second or third application, you would side dress the fertilizer along the side of the plants during this plant growing period. And you could put down about a 1/4 pound of triple 10 or equivalent per 10-foot row if you needed to, but it all depends on your soil test on what you actually need to do. This is only just a suggestion, not a recommendation, but this is just an idea, an example how you would apply if you needed to. Your soil test will tell you what you need to apply at the beginning of the season, what you need to be applying mid-season, and at the end. Just when you're filling out your soil test, be sure to let whoever you're sending your soil to know that you're planting for onions or any other vegetable crop where you're trying to do these plantings at, and let them know that so they can give you the proper recommendations. Irrigation. Onions are shallow rooted and require constant moisture for good growth. If the planting does not receive 1 inch of rain each week, soak the soil thoroughly at least once a week. Drip irrigation provides better control than overhead sprinklers. An inch of water will wet a sandy soil to the depth of 10 inches and a heavy clay soil to 6 inches of depth. If your soil is sandy, it's important to water more often than once a week, so just monitor that. Use a trowel to see how far down the soil is wet And if it's only an inch or two, keep the water running and get a little more water down and soak it down some. Stop watering when the bulbs have reached full size and the tops begin to fall over. Okay, so pest management. Two of the biggest problems with onions and a lot of the family of garlic and shallots and chives are thrips and maggots. Thrips and maggots are two insect pests that can destroy an onion crop. Knowing what to look for and how to control these pests are very critical for your crops. Onion thrips are small, thin insects that can be hard to see without a hand lens. Adult thrips are yellow to brown in color. Typically, the thrips can be found in the inner folds of the onion leaves towards the bulb. Their rasping, sucking mouth parts are used to feed on the fluids from the onion leaves. After the damage has occurred, the leaves take on a silvery color with specks on the leaves and often fold over. Thrips thrive in hot and dry weather and feed on small grains and moving to onions once the grains have dried or been harvested. To help decrease the chances of thrips moving into your onions, avoid planting near small grains or plant resistant or tolerant onion varieties, which are out there. Onion maggots are a small fly that will lay its eggs in the soil near the growing onion plant. The larva, known as a maggot, feeds on the roots of the onion. As the bulbs grow, the onion maggot may continue to feed on it. This will result in the bulb rot during storage. To reduce onion maggots, avoid planting onion plants in undecomposed organic matter such as manure. Crop rotation will also help avoid onion maggots. Crop rotation is planting onions in areas where onions have not been previously, or garlic or shallots or chives, anything in that family. Avoid planting onions in the same location for numerous years. Really, you don't want to plant anything in that family of garlic, shallots, chives, or onions in the same spot. Generally, you might want to just move them together in the same rotation because they're going to carry the same problems into those beds. So the onion thrip damage. Here is an example here. There it is. Onion thrips are annual pests. They attack many garden crops, but this most commonly damage the onions, leek, and garlic family of plants. Adult onion thrips are about 1/12 of an inch long, thin and pale, yellow to brown in color. Their wings have only a single central vein and are fringed with long hairs. Nymphs resemble adults, but they are smaller and lack wings, which is the smaller version of the adults. They are the immature thrips. Onion thrips prefer tight spaces and cause severe damage on plants that produce tightly packed leaves. Feeding causes whitish blotches that appear as silvery streaks on leaves. As feeding continues, affected tissue may turn dry and yellow and may eventually brown and die. Onion thrips can also carry viruses, fungal diseases, or bacteria to our plants. On onions, thrips prefer to feed on the youngest leaves, and the tips of these leaves often brown and die. Thrips feeding can also lead to distorted and undersized bulbs. Red onions are particularly susceptible to thrips damage, while Spanish onions tend to be somewhat more tolerant to the damage. Onion thrips overwinter in legumes such as alfalfa or wheat fields, in weedy areas, and in onion bulbs not removed from the onion fields. Females can reproduce without mating, so yeah, they will never go away, I guess, sadly, and lay eggs on the underside of the leaves. Thrips populations can develop very rapidly, with eggs hatching after 5 to 10 days, and they can have up to 5 to 8 generations per year. That's a lot of bugs. And outbreaks are more likely to occur in the summer during hot, dry periods. Some onion varieties have resistance, so read up on those cultivars. Monitoring for thrips usually occurs between late June and early September during those hot periods. Control should be done by removing plant debris from gardens, as well as any surrounding areas where you will be growing onions or any other susceptible vegetables, and to prevent any overwintering to get that plant material out of the way. Chemical applications can be done, but read up on your manufacturer's label and what kind of pesticides can be used for onions. Here's the onion maggot damage here. The onion maggot larvae cause damage by using their hooked mouth parts to enter the base of the plant. First generation maggots can cause very noticeable damage to the seedlings, which first wilt and then become flaccid. Frequently, attacked seedlings die before the maggots are fully grown, forcing the maggots to move to adjacent plants. Second generation maggots feed on the developing bulbs, resulting in distorted growth accompanied by rotting tissue, and further feeding by third generation maggots on late season onion bulbs also results in an unmarketable, unusable product. In addition, feeding and burrowing by the maggot may introduce fungal, bacterial, or virus pathogens. So you can see there the damage done. You can see in the top right where the little larvae is coming out of the plant. And you can see in the bottom right a good and a bad onion from all this. You can see the bottoms of the green onions, and you can see where it's died on the bottom left there. So yeah, the damage can be very substantial. Okay, so we've got several different diseases here to talk about. This leaf blight here is a fungus which attacks areas on the leaves that have been previously injured. I think it's called botrytis leaf blight. A week after infection, white spots will appear on the onion leaves, expand and cause the leaf tips to brown, and eventually the leaves will die. Botrytis leaf blight can be managed by rotating onion crops and other related vegetables such as shallots, garlic, and chives on a 3 to 4 year cycle. So try to have a 3 to 4 year cycle of garden areas or beds where your garlic and your shallots and your onions are going to be every few years. They're not going to be in that same area the next year. This will help reduce the threat of disease. Good soil drainage will help reduce plant moisture, and adequate plant spacing will increase air movement through the onion leaves, which will help try to keep some of that blight down. Botrytis neck rot is a fungus that appears brown and causes the onion scales to shrivel and become soft. These symptoms are first noticed in storage and develop on onions that are diseased or injured. This disease can be managed by allowing ample time for the onion's neck tissue to completely dry in the field. The windrow method works well for this. Create a windrow by raking a long line of soil into a mounded row and laying the onions on top of the row to dry. If you must bring the onions indoors, keep it in a dry, well-ventilated area. Avoid injuring the onion when you are cutting the tops and placing them in storage. It's always best not to cut the top off until it's completely dry, which we'll talk a little bit about that. Downy mildew is a fungus that develops when the weather is cool and wet. It appears on the old leaves of the young plant, usually after the leaves have reached 6 inches. As the fungus progresses on the infected leaves, a white, almost purplish mold develops on the leaf spots. As the mold continues to develop, it moves down the leaf until the leaf wilts and drops. To avoid downy mildew, use crop rotation with a 3 to 4 year cycle in planting areas where downy mildew has been a problem. Good drainage and air movement through the plant leaves also helps to reduce the mildew. Purchasing a pathogen-free sets and seeds can help minimize the chance of contracting the disease. Fusarium basil rot is caused by the fungus that appears on the onion in the field and in storage. The tops of the onions will turn yellow and wilt while the necks will feel soft. Under moist conditions, the neck will be soft, white mold and will be seen between the scales. Under dry conditions, the neck will be soft and the bulb will shrivel. The disease will be more severe if onions are being grown in poorly drained soil. This rot lives in soil and can be spread to plants by insects and tools that come in contact with it in the contaminated soil. Rotate these crops every 3 to 4 years to help minimize this disease. Planting resistant cultivars and managing soil insects will help reduce this disease pressure. So this one is not a good one. It can stay in the soil for a little while. White rot is just as bad. The first symptoms of stunting, yellowing, and dieback of foliage of onions, garlic, and other members of this family can be a symptom of a very destructive fungal disease called white rot. When bulbs are pulled out of the soil, they are either coated with a white-gray colored fuzz or a crusty covering that is embedded with thousands of tiny black sclerotia. And the sclerotia can live in the soil for years without the benefit of the host plants. So this is a problem if it gets into your soil. Always buy certified disease-free planting stock of garlic, onion sets, chives, things like that, shallots, and seedlings that do not have this issue that can be carried with them. Never plant onions or garlic or shallots purchased from a grocery store because sometimes they are carriers of this disease. Remove and dispose of disinfected plants. Do not attempt to compost these plants. You will continue to have this white rot organism, or fungus, I should say, remain in that area where you've composted. Work in a lot of compost infected beds and don't plant anything in the garlic, onion, shallot, chive family for 4 to 5 years in that area to give that time for that fungus to dissipate from the soil. So this is a very big problem. Crop rotation, soil drainage, and plant spacing can be used to reduce disease pressure, and creating a rotation cycle of the family of plants of garlic, onion, chives, and leeks for 3 to 5 years, 3 to 4 years. So get a series of rotational beds or garden spots that you can rotate these families through every 3 to 4 years. Other common problems: bulb rot from bruising, insufficient drying, split or double bulb from dry soil during bulb formation, very small bulbs from too late of planting, too dry as soil, or wrong varieties for the area. All right, so there's the botrytis neck rot. Yeah, that's pretty unusable at that point. I wouldn't want to be eating that onion at all. This is what the downy mildew will look like on the leaves. This is a pretty close-up microscope version of it. And this is the basil rot, or the basil rot. Not very appetizing as well. This is the white rot. This is on garlic. This is not good to find if you end up with this. So there's some samples there of it. This is on garlic, but it can do the same. It have the same result on onion or shallots or leeks. So, okay, so weed management. Weed control is difficult with onions because the crop has thin leaves that do not shade out emerging weeds. Several options are available for weed management and control. Cultivation is one option. Onion beds should be designed with row spacing to fit the cultivation equipment. You can cultivate with a tractor or other garden tools. You can see in the bottom right picture, I have my shallots and elephant garlic there, and I've got them set up for one row cultivator for my tractor. I obviously still have to kind of get up close to the plants, either hand pull or close with some garden tools, but I get a majority of it done through the rows, the center of the rows there. Be careful not to damage the onion bulbs or plants while cultivating. It's very easy to do if you don't have yourself lined up right. Black plastic can be used to cover the area between plants. You can plant into the plastic, and then those plants can come up through the holes, or have them sticking out of the holes already, I should say. This will help reduce the weed pressure and give them a chance, but obviously you're going to have to do a lot more irrigating because the water cannot get through the plastic, so you'll have to do a lot more irrigating in that situation. Crop rotation will also help with certain weeds. Herbicides can be used as long as they're listed for onions. Pre-emergent or post-emergent herbicides could be utilized, but follow the pre-harvest interval restrictions on the label of the days that must elapse between herbicide application and when onions can be harvested. And that goes for pesticides or any fungicides as well. Always read and follow the manufacturer's label for its instructions. All right, so harvesting. Harvesting green onions is usually done when the tops are 6 inches tall. You can harvest bulbs after 2/3 or more of the tops have fallen over naturally, as you see in that picture there. Do not wait more than 1 or 2 weeks after this occurs. You will not have a good result if you wait too long. Gently pull the bulbs from the soil with the tops attached. To prevent rot, bulbs need to be properly cured. Curing is the process of drying the cut top or neck of the bulb. This process can take 2 to 4 weeks or until the outer scales of the bulb are papery thin. Cut the tops approximately 1 inch above the bulb. Curing is best done in a shaded area outdoors on sunny, breezy days, and this could be done in a well-ventilated shed, barn, garage, or porch for 1 to 2 weeks out of the direct sun. However, weather conditions may not permit this, and curing should take 3 to 7 days, if depending on the weather. As long as the weather is okay, it should only take that long. But if the weather's a problem, you may have to bring them inside. So if you're experiencing wet and humid weather, bring those onions indoors so you can get them cured. And when they're stored indoors, they should be in a shady, cool, and dry place. And I would try to run a fan as well. So with the cutting the tops approximately 1 inch above the bulb, that needs to be done after the curing process has completed. You don't want to do that until after the curing process has completed, which is at 3 to 7 days. You want that to stay on there. I generally don't cut it off at all. I like to just tie it up and hang them and dry it that way. And that way I don't have any issues. I just keep them on there. And when I cut the tops off when I'm ready to either replant them or eat them. And so that's just all up to you on that. But I usually just leave it on. It doesn't hurt. I do that with my garlic as well, my shallots. Storage and preservation. Store onions in a moderately cool 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit at 65 degrees to 70 degrees, or 65% to 70% relative humidity. And in a dry, well-vented area, such as in a mesh bag, wire basket, you can hang dry, or you can have in an open crate for up to 6 to 7 months in your storage area. Not everybody has 32 to 40 degree storage areas. So a basement with low humidity, maybe with a fan running, or a garage, especially when now that it's getting cooler, they can stand to be out there a little longer because it's not hot and humid in the garage anymore. It's going to actually be cool, low humidity out there. So it'll probably be good at being stored there. But run a fan if you need to keep the humidity and keep the airflow going. Onions will begin sprouting if temperatures are too high, or freeze if temperatures are below freezing. So just be aware of that garage. Will it freeze, or will it get too hot in there? So you have to make sure of that. Basement's probably going to work better, but with the temperatures in your house, if you run a lot of heat in the wintertime, it could also cause issues too. Inspect and remove damaged or rooted bulbs on a regular basis, and careful handling to avoid any bruising helps control storage rots. Tops may be left on or cut off, but leave at least 1 inch to the top when storing. So like I said, you see there in those pictures, they're curing those there. They've got them sitting on some newspaper, and in the bottom there, they've got them sitting on a bench. That's curing. When they go into storage, they're going to be in those little mesh bags. A lot of times you see at the grocery store, or you can have them in a crate with just a crate with a lot of airflow through it. Things like that to keep them in. I always leave those plant tops on. I don't have any issue. They just dry up real well. I actually will tie them together and then hang them. And then when I'm ready to use them, I break them down. I cut them off then at that point. But that's all up to you. There's just some options out there. Preservation. Onions can be stored dry, frozen, pickled, and canned. Never had pickled onion, but it sounds good. They freeze well if chopped and covered with water. And for fresh storage, maintain, once again, that good air circulation. Preparation, use, and nutrition. You can peel and bake whole or cut into pieces for food dishes. You can use raw in salads or in cooked dishes. It's a great source of vitamin C, fiber, and many other vitamins and minerals. It's free of fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, low in sodium. You can purchase or use onions free of mold or rot, definitely. That's what you should be purchasing, free of mold or rot, which I've got a rotted onion that was in our mesh bag that we bought at the grocery store. I'll show you here at the end of this section. Choose onions that are firm, dry, bright, with smooth outer skins for the best food experience. And then the environmental preferences, excuse me. This is a recap here. They like sunny, well-drained loam soil, medium rich fertility, a range of 5.5 to 7 soil pH, but they like 6 to 6.8 the best, 45 to 60 degrees during planting development, and 60 to 75 degrees during bulb development and curing. The moist but not waterlogged soils. Suggested cultivar types, you've got green, which is ideal for bunching, which is typically a scallion or your green onion. You've got the dry type, which are ideal for storage, or those are the large bulbs. You've got the sweet onions, which are generally a mix between the dry bulbs and green onions. And they have that mild onion flavor. So let's talk about some suggested cultivars for the Ohio region. You've got the green onion types, early yellow globe, which is a long day onion. Remember, that's a long day, 15 or 16 hours or more of daylight. You've got the yellow color of it, and the planting method that is best for it is seeds. Now, you could do seeds, transplants, or sets, but seeds is always the ideal version for green onions of that variety. Ebenezer, it's a long day onion, yellow in color, with sets the preferred method. White spear is a long day, it's a white onion, and seeds is the preferred planting method. You've got the white sweet Spanish, it's a long day onion, it's a white onion, and transplant is its preferred way of being planted. The one is ideal for storage, the dry onion, Ebenezer, again, long day, yellow, and its sets is preferred planting method. Early yellow globe, long day, yellow color, with seeds the preferred method. Sweet sandwich, it's a long day, a yellow onion, and sets. Walla Walla, long day onion, white or yellow, and transplants. And lastly, the candy, it's an intermediate, so it does not need as long a day of sunlight. It's that in between. It's a yellow color, and it can be done set, seed, or transplants. So it's pretty well can handle all three of those areas there. And the last one is sweet onion. You have the white sweet Spanish, which is a long day white onion, and transplants is this planting method. Yellow sweet Spanish, it's a long day, it's yellow, and transplant is its planting method. And Walla Walla, it's a long day, white or yellow, and transplants as well. Okay, let me back up real quick. I'm going to turn my screen on, and I'm going to show you, here we go, a sample of a rotten onion that was in our batch of onions. This is actually pretty rotten. It's very moldy. It either was in the onion mesh bag too long, or it already had some issues, and this is the result. This is obviously a yellow onion. I don't have a white onion here, but I have a yellow onion here from the store. And then I have a red onion as well. This one is actually going bad too. It's got a little rotten spot on it as well. Now, it may still be usable. I'll have to look at it a little more. It's not as bad as this other yellow onion that's rotting. The other one is pretty mushy. It's got quite a bit of mold on it. And so that's one I'm going to probably put into compost or throw out. All right, I'm going to stop my video again, and we're going to talk about shallots again next here. Okay, so shallots. Whoops, there we go. Okay, so shallots, they are in the genus Alucepa aggregatum is how you would say that. And they're in the family Amaryllidaceae. They're a cool season crop, moderately easy to grow, and they have medium nutrient needs. They're high water user, and their common propagation is through sets or cloves, however you would say that. Shallots are multiplier type onions that divide into a clump of smaller bulbs resembling tulip bulbs. Shallots have a mild delicate onion flavor and pink outer skin when peeled. Shallots are grown from cloves or small shallot bulbs. Although it's not certain that shallots have been found in the wild, it's most likely that this plant, which dates back to the beginning of, of the early Christian era, is only a modification of a variety of onion. Shallots are gourmet and hearty members of the onion family that are prized for their delicate onion-like flavor, and they have a mild, delicate, but distinctive flavor and can either be grown for use as green shallots or for the clusters of small bulbs that are used like garlic or onions. Many gourmet chefs use shallots for sauces, stews, gravies, and roasts. Shallots are planted and cared for in much of the same manner as onions, although there are several varieties of shallots. They are usually listed in garden catalogs simply as shallots. Shallots grow best in cool weather and are usually planted in the fall for late spring harvest. Shallots grow best from fall planting, but could be planted in the spring if planted early enough and mature before hot parts of the early summer. And all onion relatives should be grown in full sun for best results. With shallots are a type of onion family, so full sun is going to be their best result. In the top right picture, that's actually one of my shallots. I planted in a spring shallot last year. I was working on just growing some seed stock, and that was what it looks like as it grows there. So, and it tastes just like a shallot green onion type thing when you cut those green shoots off of it. They're very good. Okay, so site selection, very similar to onions. Shallots should be grown in areas that have full sun, loose, well-drained, fertile, loam to sandy loam soils with plenty of organic matter. Shallots prefer soil pH between 5.0 and 7 with 6 to 6.8 of the best. Soil for shallots should be rich, loose, mixed with plenty of compost, decomposed manure, and other organic matter which can be added before planting. And like onions, it's best to avoid heavy clay soils, but if heavy clay soils is the only option, the soil should be modified with organic matter to improve aeration and soil drainage and nutrients. Work on compost to loosen the compaction of those heavy soils. Heavy soils do not allow those shallot bulbs to grow, of course, to their full potential as well. And growing shallots in poorly drained, highly compacted soil can lead to also disease and bulb development issues. Improve your soil organic matter content by adding well-rotted manure or compost in the spring or fall, and do not use fresh manure as it may contain those harmful bacteria or weed seeds from the previous year. So make sure it's very, very decomposed manure. Prior to planting, till your soil to provide a loose bed for good bulb development. Organic matter added should meet most nutrient needs, but soil tests will let you know if you need to add any more or any fertilizer as you go. So always remember again, your soil test. You can see in that picture there on the right, that's me growing my shallots in my rows there. That was my first year growing them. And they did pretty well. I was very excited to grow shallots this past, let's see, when was that? Last spring, last spring. And of course, there's my tractor again. Purchase those quality shallots of seeds, transplants, or sets, wherever you're going to get those from. Okay, so planting, grow shallots as you would onions. If shallots for planting are sold in clumps, divide into individual sets or bulbs before planting. Plant as soon as the soil can be worked, either in the mid to late fall or that early springtime. Review the varieties purchased from seed sources on what season works best for your planting, because they are not all the same. Some may rather be planted in the spring, and so read up on that. Shallot bulbs can be planted in the fall for a spring harvest or in the spring for a smaller yield in the early summer harvest. Space shallots about 4 to 8 inches apart within the row and plant the individual sets 1 to 2 inches deep, and allow 12 to 24 inches between the rows. Plant with pointed tip up. Tip should be just below the soil line or barely poking through. I usually like to have it right below the soil line. Shallot bulbs often develop on top of the ground, so you do not cover them with soil once they start coming up. They will begin breaching the surface. Don't put soil on those. Let them grow. That's what they do. They will come to the surface, and that's what they're supposed to do. So do not put soil on them when you start seeing them breach the surface of the ground there. During the growing season, some of the leaves may be cut at the ground level and used as green onions. Plants that are not heavily cut will proceed to form many bulbs attached together, forming a clump. Shallots produce a cluster of bulbs from a single planted bulb. Shallots are very hardy and will survive most winters. Shallots can be grown from seed, but this is not as common and can be difficult with some varieties not even producing seed. So just be aware of what's out there. Shallots grown from seed are responsive to day length and need to be planted early enough in the spring to respond to the lengthening of days of summer for bulb development. Plant seed a half-inch deep and a half-inch to 3/4 inches apart in a 2 to 4-inch band of a bed at a seeding rate of 40 to 50 seeds per row, per foot of row. This will produce a high percentage of single bulb plants, not the big clump, but a single bulb. Use those single bulbs then to plant in the fall for your next spring's harvest, so you'll get the large clumping of shallots. You can see in the box there, that's my box of shallots. They are sitting in my garage right now, ready to be planted here in the next, I would say the next few weeks. I'm going to be working on that. I'll be breaking those apart and getting them in the ground. And those are Dutch red shallots that I have there. Dutch red. We'll learn more about those here. Okay, so fertilization. That's my shallots there again there on the right. Grown very well. I enjoyed growing them. They were great to grow. I'm looking forward to it again. Before planting begins, it's recommended to get that soil test. The soil test will give you that full analysis of what you need for your nutrients and what your pH level is. Follow the directions of the recommendations. Be sure to put shallots that you're testing for. That way they can give you the recommendations on how to grow shallots. They'll give you those amendments that you may need to take. Shallots are a heavy feeder requiring high levels of nutrients. A minimum of 2 fertilizer applications may be needed, and even up to 3. Fertilizer applications of complete fertilizer is recommended throughout the growing season. Fertilizer example. This is an example. Now your soil test will tell you what you need to do. Could be mixing 3 pounds of triple 10 fertilizer per 100 square feet into the soil before planting, and then side dressing with 2 pounds of triple 10 per 100 square feet once or twice during the growing season. This is just an example though. It may be less, it may be more. Your soil test will let you know if you need to add more or less in that situation. Irrigation is the same as onions. They need water. They're on the surface too, so it's going to be fairly dry there, but you don't, of course, want to overwater them either. Shallots are shallow rooted and require constant moisture for good growth and bulb development. If the planting does not receive 1 inch of rain each week, soak the soil thoroughly at least once a week, and drip irrigation will provide good irrigation for them. 1 inch of water will wet a sandy soil to 10 inches and heavy clay to 6 inches, as we talked about with onions. Use a trowel to test and see if it's getting down in there around those shallots. And stop watering once the bulbs have reached full size and they begin to yellow and brown and they begin to fall over. Weed management is the same as onions. It can be difficult because they have thin leaves and they do not shade out any weeds around them, as you can see in the pictures. Cultivation is one option with the tractor or garden tools, black plastic, crop rotation, and any herbicides labeled for shallots, pre-emergent or post-emergent, and follow any of those pre-harvest interval instructions, and read and follow all label instructions from your manufacturer. Harvesting. Shallots can be harvested for use as green onions about 6 weeks after planting, and pull green shallots when they are about 1/4, or I should say 1/4 or 3/8 inch in diameter, and when their tops are 6 to 8 inches high, and store the green shallots in a cold, moist, a cool place for a short period. I'm sorry. There we go. Store in a cool place for a short period. There we go. Harvest mature bulbs when tops have turned yellow and are dying down. The shallot bulbs should be 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter. Mature dry bulbs are dug after the tops die back, usually around June into July, depending on your planting date. Gently pull the bulbs from the soil with the tops attached. Harvest and handle in the same manner as dry onions. Those dates, June and July, may be even earlier, depending. it just depends how our year goes. It could even be May. Just depends. Curing. Cure in a warm, dry place for about a week. Bulbs need to be properly cured to prevent any rot. Curing dries the bulbs. Tops can be cut off after harvest, but I usually leave them on just like onions, just to prevent any issues. And I leave the tops generally on all my stuff like shallots, onions, and garlic when drying to ensure that they dry well. I would leave at least a 1/4 inch after cutting the top once you do that, though. And that might be a little big still, but just kind of judge that on what looks in comparison to onion on how to cut that. I would maybe do about a 1/4 though. Approximate yields is 10 to 20 shallots per bulb planted and 4 to 8 pounds per 10-foot row. And 3 to 4 pounds you could raise for any person if you wanted to. Storage and preservation. Store shallots in moderate 32 to 40 degrees with 60 to 70% relative humidity. In that dry, well-ventilated area and ventilated containers such as a mesh bag, wire basket, hang dry them, or open crates for 6 months or longer. They store for it pretty well. Obviously, that, like I said, with the basements or the garages, you can do the same thing with those as your onions, your shallots, as you do with your onions or your garlic. Good airflow is very important. That's the biggest thing. Good airflow. A fan running will help keep that drying, keep that air flowing and drying those out. Shallots keep well and are easily stored until planting time in the spring. If you save them for spring or for the fall. I've had mine since, let's see, I planted them in, I can't remember. I think it was spring this year. I did spring shallots again, and they're ready now for me to plant in the fall. So I'm, having more seed stock as well. Replant the smaller bulbs or use them first since they do not keep as well. Preservation. Shallots should be stored dried, pickled, frozen, or canned. They freeze well if chopped and covered with water, and for storage, maintain that good airflow if they're stored dry. Shallots can be cooked or raw consumed. Shallots have a mild flavor prized by gourmet chefs and are used in the green onion stage or as bulbs. And let's recap. They like sunny, well-drained sandy loam soils, medium rich fertility, 5 to 7 pH with a 6 to 6.8 is the best. They like growing in temperatures of 55 to 75 degrees and moist but not wet soil. Shallots can be classified into 3 general groups. You have the French varieties, the gray griselli varieties, and the Dutch shallot varieties. French varieties are typically the commercial ones that are available in our local grocery stores. French red is the most common variety sold commercially. French varieties all have brownish red skin, pinkish purple flesh, and pear-shaped bulbs. Their flavor is a combination of onion and garlic. Like all shallots, their flavor is at its best after being sauteed in butter, although they can also be eaten raw in salads. I love them anyway, just like onions. Oh, the gray grisellis. They are claimed by the French. Many people, especially in France, consider the grays varieties of shallots to be the best in terms of flavor. The French consider the gray shallot to be the true shallot. No French chef would allow any other variety into the kitchen, is what they would typically say. The pear-shaped 1 and a half inch bulbs have gray skin and pinkish white flesh. Dutch shallots. The flavor of Dutch variety shallots is stronger and more like an onion than any other shallot varieties. They tend to be round and feature orange-yellow skin and yellowish cream-colored flesh. I actually grow the Dutch reds, and they have some Dutch yellows we'll talk about too. There's 2 different cultivar types. You have the fall planting varieties and the spring planted varieties. The list of varieties that I have for you are only a few suggestions to grow, but they're not recommendations because I don't have a full list of recommendations for Ohio. Maybe we should do some research on see what ones would work best. Maybe I could work on that. These are from Arkansas, these suggestions, but they could do well in our region as well. Many other varieties are out there that could be suitable for our Ohio climate. So fall planted shallot bulbs, you've got the Dutch, which is a 200 days to maturity, 2 pounds of bulbs per 100-foot row. Bulbs average 2 inches in diameter, yellow-brown bulb scales, yellow to cream-colored flesh, and each bulb will grow into a cluster of 8 to 12 shallots. They're widely adaptable, and they keep well based on my experience with the Dutch Reds, so they do keep fairly well for me at least. Don't know about other folks. The French Red, it's a 200 days of maturity. It's 2 pounds of seeds or bulbs per 100 feet of row. The reddish pink bulb scales, pale purple pink flesh, mild distinct flavor. Each bulb multiplies to produce up to 30 additional bulbs. They're widely adapted but do not keep as well. The grays, there's a 200 days of maturity, 2 pounds of seed or bulbs per 100-foot row. They're reddish pinkish bulb scales, pale purple to pink flesh, mild distinct flavor. Each bulb multiplies to produce up to additional 30 bulbs again. Oh, I read the wrong one. Let me do that again. Grays. I'm sorry, I was reading the other one again. French shallot. They are 200 days to maturity. They are 2 pounds per 100-foot row for the grays. In France, gray shallots are considered the best large elongated bulb, about 4 inches long. Bulb scales are firm, dull, grayish brown, purple white flesh, strong distinctive flavor, but they do not stow well. So these are the grays, what I just mentioned there. I was reading them off the wrong one there. The grays have that difference there. Okay, so we'll talk about the spring planted shallot seeds, the Prisma hybrid. They're 95 days of maturity. They're 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. They're red skin, long to midday shallot, smooth, thick skin, great storage ability, and easy to grow from seed. The Matador hybrid, 95 days of maturity, 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. Long to midday French shallot with reddish brown, thick skins, round shape, forms few clusters, excellent keeper, and easy to grow from seed. The Ambition hybrid is 100 days to maturity, 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. They're French half-long style bulb, reddish skin with white flesh, stores well. The Conserver hybrid, 110 days to maturity, 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. The reddish brown skin, white flesh, produces high percentage of single bulbs. And I don't know what the shelf life is on it. They did not say. The Picador hybrid is 105 days maturity. They're 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. They're French, half-long style bulb, reddish skin with white flesh, and store well. And then the Saffron hybrid, 100 days to maturity. They're 1/8 of an ounce of seeds per 100-foot row. They have copper skin with yellow flesh, and they store well. So thank you today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation today, and I look forward to seeing you at the 2021 Ohio Farm Science Review. Hopefully we're in person again at the Molly Cairn Center. And I look forward to seeing you there and being able to present this information to you. Let me turn my screen back on. I want to show you real quick the shallots that I grew here. As you can see, they're a little small because I did them in the spring. But as you can see, as I peel them off, there's the seed to plant. And I leave, like I said, I leave a little bit of the stem on there once I do cut them. And then you can see where they started from right there. And I'm going to stop my sharing, and that way you guys can see them a little closer. So there they are. Okay, there they are. And then I just kind of break them apart, and then I'll be able to grow them from there. And then there's the stem I usually keep there at the top. It's a little hard to see, I know, but, and like I said, there they are again. So you just break those up and you would plant those. And let me share my screen one more time. So thank you today. And if you have any other questions, just let us know and I'll be glad to help you out. You know where I work in OSU Extension, Butler County. Thank you today. Have a good rest of the event.